Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and this is Evelyn Art. Today I'm just painting in my sketchbook, so it's going to be kind of a chill day work-wise, but I asked you guys what I should talk about in this video, and after a very long and drawn-out and dramatic voting session, it was finally decided story time about art school. Now, I know storytime videos are kind of a thing of the past for a lot of people, but I was not on YouTube back then, so you're just gonna have to bear with me as we go down memory lane. Unfortunately, when I look back on my time in art school, I'm only about 20% proud of my time there. Maybe 20% of that, jealous of my old self, wish I could go back and do it better knowing what I know now, and the remaining 60% is probably embarrassment over how lacking in self-awareness I was. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way about their time in college, but I digress. This story is about the time that I was accused of stealing someone else's idea in a painting class. It was my senior year of college, and to give you context, painting studio classes were about 3 hours long, and we would work on projects for a couple of weeks at a time and then present our work for critique at the end of that time. There were probably 15 of us in that class, and one student in particular seemed to have a painting style that most of us really liked. Their compositions were always kind of out of left field and had a very consistent aesthetic, which marked a very signature style. I remember being very caught up with my grades at the time, because I think I thought that they were what validated me as a real artist, was my professor saying, yes, you completed this assignment the way I wanted you to. Which was so missing the point. I think that something I respected about the student had to do with the fact that they just created without much regard to the prompt. So don't know if that's really right or wrong. While I had no idea what kind of grades they were actually getting, I felt like even if they had a C, they also had the respect of their peers, and that was worth, a good amount. I do think it should be noticed that this person and I were acquaintances at best. We weren't really friends. We weren't on bad terms or anything, but we just had class together and went our separate ways. So one day we're having a critique, and this student's painting was just so stinking cool. I just really liked it, and a lot of people did. It had this unfinished look to it and featured mostly faceless figures. I think they were family members, and very simple flat backgrounds and color blocks with this person's usual color palette. Remember, the look of it really resonated with me, as other paintings in that style often did. So we finished critique and talked about the next assignment, and ideas just start flooding in, and I was so excited to get started. Over the next couple of hours, I went through the process of planning out my concept, gathering references, painting sample work, and then by the next class, I finally got started on my 30 by 40 inch canvas. I began to paint out my idea, which was essentially an abstraction of one of my favorite crazy pictures of my family, but I wanted to try out the faceless aspect, specifically because at the time, I didn't like to render people because I always got lost at the face. So it was a really freeing idea to me. I did also employ a few of the colors that the other student regularly used, but then I also added in my own colors to it, and I felt plenty good about that. I was really enjoying the way that it looked, and it was a lot of fun to play with a new style. And at some point around the second class, my professor came up to me and started asking me questions about my painting, which she usually did anyway. This was not out of the ordinary. But I started explaining my plan to her and showing her all of my work previous, and I told her what I was aiming for, and she listened, and then she just quietly said, "It's maybe looking a little bit too much like so-and-so's last painting, so if I were you, I might consider changing the way it looks." She was nice about it, but holy crap, I broke out in a cold sweat of embarrassment. I was like, that is absolutely not my intention. I'll totally change it. I'll figure something out. And she was very understanding, and she left me to work on my stuff. So that's when I looked over at the other student and noticed them looking at me and their friends, and they were whispering, and it kind of felt like middle school. I wanted to cry. I realized there was a good chance that that student actually asked the professor to come over and talk to me and, call it out. But honestly, y'all, okay, if I was trying to rip someone else's work off intentionally, would I do it right in front of them and a bunch of other artists? So then I called my friend over, who was also in the class, and asked her if she thought it looked like I was copying, and she said something to the effect of I can see what's you, and I can also see what's being influenced by so-and-so. And we talked a little bit more, and I tried to get to the bottom of where I had diverged from just letting something inspire me to doing basically the same thing. At that point, I felt, regardless of intentions, I was in the wrong, I needed to fix it, but class was over and I had to come up with a new project. So it was like midnight that night that I'm kind of tossing and turning in bed, and I just can't get it out of my head. So I finally got up, opened my sketchbook, and just replanned the whole painting, the whole concept, with a few additional layers of mixed media stuff. And I also resolved to face it with the other student and apologize for my overstepping and have a conversation about it. So a couple days later in class, the first thing I did was pull the person aside and ask forgiveness. And I told them that, I really love your work and I was inspired by it, but I never meant to pull from it so directly. And so I'm going to change the direction of my painting. But the most awkward part was that they wouldn't look me in the eye, and they just kept saying, okay, it's fine. Like, before I had even gotten to apologize. So I really had to push my way through that conversation, and it was super uncomfortable. So I don't know what that was about. Like, I don't love confrontation either, but it seemed like this person was like even more conflict avoidant, whatever. But I ended up executing my plan and making it almost unrecognizable from what it was at the beginning, and my professor called it wild and gave me a low A, and I felt good about how it all turned out. But of course, deep down, I was still bothered that I may have just hurt my honor as an artist among the rest of these artists, even if I tried to make it right. Like, I had to know that not everybody was going to know that I apologized, or, I recognized what I had done wrong or anything like that. I had to just be okay with that. As the year went on, I continued to experiment with different styles, because that's what art school was about for me, was about like finding what I liked and conceptually what worked for me and aesthetically what worked for me. And eventually I let myself try the faceless figures again, even though I was honestly still really scared too. Like, it was a whole different painting class, and I was still scared that someone was going to be like, hey, that's what so-and-so does, as if they're the only person who's ever done it. So through the years, as I've remembered this experience, I've thought about it from a few different angles, because on the one hand, there is a tendency for artists to become their signature style. Like, it's a brand that they don't stray from. And the idea is, in order for someone to recognize their work, it needs to fit into their chosen aesthetic. On the other hand, nobody owns techniques, not even the people who invent them. The way humanity works, at least if we want to get anywhere, is that we build upon each other's knowledge and discoveries. So, in the same way that I was learning what other artists discovered in art history, I was also learning from my peers. But that seemed to be wrong somehow. And maybe it all comes down to whether or not you're giving the person whose style you're referencing credit for the inspiration. But I feel like you can go down a rabbit hole with that too, because chances are it didn't originate just from them. It's probably an amalgamation of a bunch of different artists' work, and it just kind of shows up in them, and that's who you're exposed to. Ultimately, though, I still just want to be respectful when I am aware of who I'm directly referencing, especially if they're currently a working artist trying to make money from their style, which is why I ask permission from the artists I study before doing one of my videos where I emulate their style and learn new techniques and expand my visual vocabulary, and I don't feature artists who are uncomfortable being featured and studied. But think about it. When you build on elements which reflect Vincent van Gogh's style or Pablo Picasso's style, is anyone calling it out for like plagiarism or, oh, you're just ripping them off? Probably not, because those guys fathered art styles which then countless people have taken and built upon, and that's how art moves through the ages. But that's just my thoughts. I'd really love to know what you guys think. Did I cross a line by trying out some of my peers' techniques and trying to build upon them in my own way? Was it fair game and I just cowered in the face of adversity? Or is this something you've experienced from one side or the other? Just feel free to share in the comments. I'd love to get a conversation going about this. Either way, thank you so much for hanging out with me during this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I hope you have an awesome day. Bye.